Hello, I'm Jay Strack, and I want to welcome you today to There's Always a Way podcast. So if you're watching or listening, you know I try to bring on guests and influencers, and many of these are those that have influenced me personally, relationally, or through their books, or through being exposed to their phenomenal ministries or leadership. I'm a big believer that I'm to be a student of leadership, and I fell in love with best practices. So I'm doing my best to share with you some of the best practices, some of the best advice, and some of the most remarkable leaders that I know. It's my pleasure and privilege today to have a longtime friend, longer than either one of us will admit unless we're under oath, Dr. Bob Reccord from Atlanta, Georgia. Bob, good to have you with us.
What an honor and a privilege to be with you on anything, Jay.
We've been on a bunch of things together.
We have, and survived them all.
We have, and so far, so fingers crossed on today. Bob, we've entitled this podcast, There's Always a Way. When you hear as a leader, as a man of God, as a father, husband, and encourager, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the phrase or read the phrase, there's always a way?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that you came up with such a great title, because there always is, and it characterizes your life beautifully. What comes to my mind, Jay, is when the scripture says nothing is impossible with God. And hand in hand with that, in Proverbs 16:9, it says, we may make plans in our heart, but it's God alone who orders our steps. And along the way, I found that to find the right way, I had to come to a point of saying, God, I'm doing the best I can to make the best and wisest plans I can. But if any place along the journey, my plans and directions don't match your steps that you've ordained for me, then God, please trump my plans. Boy, has he done that a few times, and it has shown me that there's always a way.
Well, Bob, one of the things that, when people look at someone who's been a mega church pastor in several states, been a highly effective executive leader in one of the largest denominations in our country. You've been involved with so many issues. And then I think of your time at the CMP. You put it all together. It's a very unusual journey, but it looks like the Lord has kind of prepared you each stage along the way. So before we get into your remarkable book, I want you, if you would, to just talk to our listeners, our viewers. As a leader, what are a couple of the great lessons you've learned along the way? And then I want you to talk on that unique opportunity you had at CMP.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jay. Well, I learned that if you're not going forward and growing, you're dying. And one of the things that has always been an important thing to me, and I know to you, is constantly learning from those who are ahead of the journey from me, and always saying, what can I gain from what they've experienced, what they've learned, so that hopefully I don't have to make some of the same mistakes. But I also have found in my journey through leadership that leadership is not just a destination, it is a process and journey. And every step of the way, God has had new things to teach me, to deepen in me, to stretch me, and to challenge me. And leadership is not some kind of golden ring that finally you just grab. It is a constant, everyday journey of growth, maturity, and change.
Well, Bob, you've been highly effective in motivating and challenging a lot of adults. I've also seen you and been the beneficiary of your ability to communicate with students. And at Student Leadership University, you've shared very candidly. And the thing I really appreciate, and one thing we try to do at Student Leadership, and you know, because your fingerprints are all over our early years in helping us get to where we are today is the fact that you always talk to them about the journey, but you talk to them that they were as serious leaders and giving them the benefit of being talked to like they matter. And that's something I can't convey to everybody. They have to have that inside them. And you were so effective in addressing not only the adults in the room, but also all those thousands of students, and then in other settings, youth pastors at our youth pastor summits. So what do you think it is that some speakers or some communicators don't quite realize the great potential of young people?
Well, what a great question. What great memories those are of having had the privilege of working side by side with you and Brent and the team at SOU. And I would say to anybody who hasn't taken advantage of getting any young person they know to SOU, please don't miss that opportunity for the difference it'll make in their life. My own kids are incredible recipients of the blessing of that ministry in their life. But as to your question, Jay, I think I hear so many adults say, oh, look at those young people. They're the leaders of tomorrow. Well, that's hogwash. They will be leaders tomorrow, but you're totally missing, adult, that they are leaders today. And that doesn't start when you're 21 or 25 or 30. It starts much earlier than that. And the young men and women as teens who start to grow and step into areas of responsibility in their schools, in their churches, in clubs and teams that they participate in, and you start seeing them take advantage opportunity and be tapped to lead as a captain of a team, as a member of student council, as an active leadership role in the church ministry for students. You see those young people leading right then, and you know God's got something special in store for them. And it takes me back to Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to prosper you, never to harm you, to give you a hope and an amazing future. That starts early on. Look at Joseph in the Old Testament. What a picture of a young man that just blossomed early and went on to be the prime minister of the most powerful nation of his world in that day.
Wow. Well, he also had to deal with some father wounds and some disappointments in family and some mistreatment. You know, Bob, I always think you're one of those I think of when folks go, well, you know, you guys have had just such a charmed life. And you know, we were born in a bubble. There's a great phrase in England, and primarily it's an Irish proverb that says, you know, I just didn't come down the river in a bubble. And I've always loved that, because there's some that think, you know, when we've had opportunities and the Lord has given us some victories, as he is prone to do, if you faithfully strive and labor in his name, and you surround yourself with the right people, which I believe is a great biblical lesson on leadership itself. Right. But, you know, some of the examples you've just given right off the top are those, so it's a perfect segue into your book, Father Wounds. Now, Bob, you've led, tell us about CMP, because I want to play off that. Sure. You've talked about students and how you treat them. You've been a megachurch pastor, as I've said. You've been a denominational leader, which takes a whole separate toolbox in itself. But then you've had this unusual experience of being with one of the most influential groups I know of, CMP.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jay. For me, I've come to believe that God's journey for any young man or woman doesn't ever just be static. It's something that's dynamic, and it can change and adjust. So for me, that led me, as you said, to be a business executive, a denominational leader, leader in 501c3 or charitable ministries, and then at CNP, out of the blue. And Council for National Policy in Washington, D.C. was established a number of years ago by some of the leading conservatives in our land, almost all of whom were totally, fully devoted followers of Christ. And they include people like Tony Perkins, Family Research Council, Attorney General Ed Meese, Stu Epperson, who heads up Salem Radio Network nationwide and worldwide. Those were the kind of people that were on my board. Kellyanne Conway was a part of my board member. And those folks gave me the blessing and the grace to come in and serve as the executive director of a group of very mature and wise Christian leaders from every discipline in America: higher education, business, government, entertainment, so many areas, faith ministry and leadership, because you were a part of that as an example. And they came together with one sole focus and purpose. How do we help our nation, America, that we love so much, move back and pull back to its constitutional foundations, which for anybody who has studied those and knows those knows that they are rooted and grounded in the scripture of Jesus Christ. So these Christians want to see our nation come back to its foundational roots and its constitutional strength, because it's based on the Word of God. That was a joy to meet with them. So in Washington, D.C., I spent a whole lot of time on Capitol Hill and with leaders that we see on the news channels day in and day out. And it was an amazing experience. But Jay, I was always humbled. I'll never forget being at the White House one day and with President George W. Bush at that time, and walking away across Lafayette Park that we just recently saw on the news so much. And as I was walking, I was crying. And the reason I had tears coming down my eyes is because I realized I didn't deserve to be there. That it was just an act of God's grace that had given me the opportunity to rub shoulders with the people I was with and found myself meeting with often, and what God was doing in me, using them to change me. And we were focused on everything we could do to try to bring those biblical principles back to our nation and its leadership. One of my really great friends at that time was now Vice President Mike Pence. And so what an amazing journey that was. But again, to those young leaders as well as older leaders, I want to say again, we often think that when God calls a person, he calls them to one thing, and that's what they do only for their entire life. For me, I haven't found that at all. I've found him to be such a God of serendipities that it was a total act of wonder and surprise of what he would take me to on the next phase and season of the journey with him. What a neat experience.
Well, Bob, you've embarrassed me a little bit by having such a humble spiritual moment. Whenever I get a chance to be in the White House and I go through those gates, I have a feeling. It's not as spiritual as yours. My feeling is I know somebody's going to grab me any minute and go, sir, there's been an awful mistake. You need to come with us right now, post haste, So forthwith, all those terms, That's always my feeling. So you've made me feel bad that you had such a spiritual okay. It's kind of like when the principal clears his voice in high school. I just got up and went downstairs because I
knew you were going to get called.
Well, Bob, almost all these areas, when you're talking about some of the great issues and crises that we face in our nation, crises that even people of faith wrestle with, it all seems to come back to something you and I've had in common, and yet your story is one that I believe everyone needs to hear. But this subject matter, and what a great title, Father Wounds. And even though Father's Day is approaching, and I want everyone to be aware of this book, you tell us how to get it. But I want you to know, Bob, this is a message that I just want in the queue, because yes, Father's Day is coming, and so anything related to fathers is germane. But this is a eternal message, and this is a message for every leader, because no matter how fast we're climbing that ladder, if it's not leaning up against the right wall, we're in guacamole, as you and I were discussing when we went on the air. So, Bob, tell us first of all about the book and how you came up with the title.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I've had the privilege of speaking to over 300,000 men in the last 15 years. And I began to ask them a question a lot because of my background. And I know you've got a very similar background of father wounds. And here was the question: whether it was a group of 100 people or 10,000 people, how many of you who are here today would say you had a dad, a stepdad, or a father figure in your life who regularly and consistently told you they loved you unconditionally, told you they were proud of you for who you were, not primarily how you performed, and made an effort to be actively involved in what was important to you? Jay, it was staggering. I never had, regardless of the size, more than 25%, maybe one time close to 30 of the men who say, I had a dad, a stepdad, or a father figure like that. I realized that I wasn't by myself, nor you by yourself, in the father wounds we carried. And so I began to write a book to help people who had dealt with situations growing up as a child or an adolescent where the relationship with dad was less than they had hoped and desired it to be. As I was writing, either myself or my wife Cheryl would start talking to women just about, what are you doing? Well, I'm writing a book. What's it about? And here's what happened over and over and over again. Women said, wait a minute, hold it, time out. It sounds like you're writing this just for men. Don't forget, a lot of us as girls had the same problem with a father wound. Don't leave us out. So I changed the book to include both. Here's the bottom line. When every boy grows up, he has a question deep inside his soul where it relates to his dad. Will I be seen as adequate? And will my dad be proud of me? Every girl has a deep question in her soul of this: does my dad love me? And does my dad think I'm pretty and special in his sight? Boys, girls, if they don't get that from dad, I don't care how much they have, how much they experience, how much dad gives them. If they don't have the right answers to those deep in their heart by what dad does, then it doesn't make much difference. They're going to carry a wound for the rest of their life until they deal with it.
Well, Bob, the elephant in the room is your early years, because I don't believe the Lord gives one that message that's able. And I love the title, Father Wounds: Hope for Healing and Preventing, Rehealing and Preventing infections caused by relational wounds. That's an interesting term. We always can think of being abused physically.
Right.
You know, I've always, and you may have used it too, I'm not insinuating it's original with me, but I've always heard that silly phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Oh, right. I've had a lot of broken bones. I'd prefer the stick or the because they heal a lot faster than those by the words.
That's so true. That's so true. Jay, William McKinley was our 25th president. As he was moving into his second term, he was at a big World's Fair event, and a man came up and shot him twice in his abdomen. One bullet, amazingly, because it was a small caliber gun, was deflected by a button on McKinley's suit, but the other one went into his abdomen. They rushed him to the hospital. They did surgery. They probed and probed, did not find the bullet. So they figured everything was okay. It must have been fine, got through, exited, whatever. And they went back and probed a couple of times, but didn't find it. But he ended up dying a few days later. Why? They went back and found, while they thought they had done everything to deal with it and it must be gone, no big deal, the wound internally had caused gangrene and took McKinley's life. When you go to Webster's dictionary, it says that a wound is a rupture to a membrane, a break, and usually accompanying with damage to the tissue below. So in the book, I say that a father wound is an emotional injury to the heart and soul of a boy or a girl by what a dad, a stepdad, or a father figure did or did not do. Because a lot of father wounds are unintentional, did or did not do by words, actions, or inaction that damaged or even ruptured the relationship. And here's the bottom line. You said a mouthful when you said, I prefer the sticks and the stones, because the words, the inactions, the lack of affirmation are much longer lasting, and they're below the surface. So if they're not dealt with thoroughly, sooner or later, they're going to resurface again.
Wow. Well, Bob, I can tell you, I think of one word as I listen to you, of all the wounds, and I know categorizing wounds is something that even the most experienced doctor is wise enough to avoid doing. But I think of abandonment as the one that made, I always felt like I was a piece of luggage,
Yeah.
or disposable. It didn't really matter. To use the vernacular of the moment, I always felt I was a non-essential in what I did because of just being abandoned. And I think the fading of the fathers is one of the things that's just ebbing away at what goes on in the life of men. Bob, I know in your life story, you know a little bit about feeling unwanted, and you know a little bit about a sense of somebody that you're counting on abandoning you.
Yeah.
I've heard lots of testimonies, lots of stories, but the one that you share so effectively about what you went through is the one that I think gives men and women permission to deal with some of the issues they've gone through. Because when they hear who you are and what all you're doing today, and I know personally the love and tenderness you show your girls, your family, and it's not just your girls, of course, but I just want you to know that you have become such a tender, loving father. So I think your story, especially the one that just seems to encapsulate everything you went through and felt, gives people permission to seek help.
Thanks, Jay. Well, I would say to anyone who's listening and joining us that if you had an experience with a dad or a stepdad or a father figure that was less than you hoped for or was your ideal, you'll choose to either become a victim of that or you'll choose to become a victor over that. But the choice is yours. And I would say for me, it was a journey that understood that abandonment comes in two ways. It comes not only in physical leaving, but it comes in emotional leaving. Dads can be at home and not be at home. And there's still the same general kind of wound. For me, I was born into a family, a young mother. I was the third in 3 boys. She was encouraged not to take me to birth because of her declining health. She did anyway, believing that God gave life and only He should take it. But that cost her life 11 months later. She would die. That left me and 2 older brothers with an alcoholic dad who didn't have a surety that he wanted us, let alone what to do with us. So he would continue to party. That would lead us to be put in sometimes closets or cellar or whatever until he was through partying. And then we would get thrown to home and house to house when he didn't want to take care of us until he got guilty and would take us back up. That would finally end for me, Jay, with an adoption. But by the time I was adopted, I was covered over 70% of my body with severe impetigo. I smelled because I was no hygiene. It was terrible. And the doctor said he smelled me before he saw me when he came into the examining room. But my adopted mom, who was a believer, had lost 4 children of her own by either miscarriage or stillbirth and almost died in stillbirth. wanted to give me a home. My dad adopted was a guy who carried father wounds of his own into our family. He was an illegitimate child. He was abused. He was in a gang by the time he was 14, looking for family, stabbed in a knife fight by the time he was 16, and now he's my dad. And so while being adopted was a happy ending, sort of, it was one in which a lot of baggage from his emotional hurts was brought. And that's why I say ending the cycle of father wounds, because when a boy or girl is wounded in their growing up or adolescent years, if it's not healed, those wounds get taken into their own family as adults. And like it or not, they're a reality. And unintentional or not, they start coming to the surface at the most awkward times. I know that because I had a stepdad, an adopted dad, who was like that. And then lo and behold, I got married and had these three things called kids. I'd never been around a baby in my life. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do now? And I had no model on how to be a dad. I would say, closing, Jay, I can sit around, or you can sit around, or anybody can sit around and wish things had been different as they were growing up. Or I can say, because of what I experienced growing up, I'm going to be a better mom or a dad because I've dealt with it, I've faced it, and I have moved beyond it through God's grace. So I either become bitter or I become better, and the choice is mine.
Wow. Well, Bob, I hear you talk, and the words, just came to mind. There is a reason a child's life, those early years, are called formative years. And it doesn't have any, it has a little bit to do with 3 R's and getting all the proper nutrients and vitamins or vitamins for my friends. But one thing I know, they're formative in many other ways as well.
Right.
Now, Bob, you've talked about that you can move from victim to victor. And one of the things that I've noticed in your life is not only did you work very hard, as I've had to do, there were no cliff notes on how to be a dad.
Well, there sure were.
And so fortunately, there was some men in my life that were later on, once I was called, saved in the Jesus movement. But in those early years of being given ministry opportunities, the Lord in his tenderness put some men around me who were protective of me and believed in me and saw what I could become. And I love the way you stress that when you talk about it's not what we are right this moment, but it's about what we can do right now, but yet what we could be. Mm-hmm. And you've spent a lifetime trying to train and help others accomplish that. Now, Bob, one thing that, I'm a big believer in don't waste your sorrows. When I was in seminary, there was a book Manly Beasley recommended to me called Don't Waste Your Sorrows. And there's some books that will change your life, but there's other books whose title is better than the book.
True.
I don't remember anything I read in the book, although I remember Manly Beasley's love and concern and gentle help, correction, and hey, Jay, have you considered this kind of approach, which was, he was such a godly man and a gift to my life. Yeah. But one of the things I do believe that there's a way to not waste your sorrows, whether it's been a battle with cancer or an illness or a divorce or some of the things we may think disqualify us from, being on the A list are actually things we've experienced that give us an opportunity to help so many others. Right. So don't waste your sorrows. Your life seems to epitomize that. And one of the things that I've got to admit, I've known you a long time and I've watched, but another door is open for you that I would have never thought of but realize what a contribution you've made and what an opportunity. And that's simply that many organizations will bring you in and ask you to share that story. And whether it's dealing with the right to life or adoption or foster homes or marriage. So Bob, tell me about some of the unique opportunities you've had to go into nonprofit organizations that are trying to be on the front lines. They're mass units, if you will, and they desperately need funds.
Yeah.
So oftentimes, of all the speakers that are out there, and there's a lot of speakers bureaus and a lot of talented individuals, but there seems to be a niche that the Lord has really used you in. And I've just got to say, every time I hear about it and hear the results of it, I go, that's an anointed situation. So tell us a little bit about some of those opportunities and what you've learned.
Well, thanks, Jay. I've had the opportunity to share my story a lot, both places like SLU, a Student Leadership University, Right to Life. I've had the privilege of raising millions of dollars literally for them, adoption homes, etc. And so one of the things that we've got to come to a point of, to your great insight, is back to Joseph in Genesis. He faced his brothers. He had the opportunity to get even. He really could set the issue straight because he had them in his hands after all those years. And what did he do? He said, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. How you look at what was in your life early or prior to right where you are right now will determine what happens in the future of where you're headed. So I determined that I had to end the cycle. And so as a result, God also put people in my life, one of which was my father-in-law, who showed me how to love a wife, how to love his kids. And my dad, my adopted dad, was a great provider, Jay. He worked hard and allowed me to be the first in our lineage of my adopted family to ever go to college. But he thought showing his love meant providing by hard work and not being home much what the family needed. What I really needed was time with my dad. My father-in-law taught me how to do that. And I got to say that I'm a better probably granddad, frankly, than I even was a dad, because men, as you have so well said, continue to model for me and show me and help me grow on how to be that loving husband, loving dad. So as a result of just overcoming tough stuff, God's opened a lot of doors, and I love sharing the story, and I love challenging people. Don't get caught in your past, launch into your future. That's what life is all about. So, I mentioned that a lot of dads, like my adopted dad, carry baggage from their life into their adult life. In the book, I mentioned 5 major things in our culture that cause dads to carry wounds into their family, one of which is the wars. If you go back to World War II to today, and you look at the number of people who have been involved in wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, the Mideast, World War II, Vietnam, it's amazing what a number of men have seen and witnessed on the battlefield. Now they have to come home and raise a family carrying that baggage with them. And if they haven't dealt with that, those wounds get brought right into the family issue. Just as one example, and I list 5 specific points that have caused a lot of dad to carry wounds they didn't mean to, but if they don't deal with them, they go into the family. So there's a great opportunity for all of us as men to get better and never bitter, and to step forward and say, I can do this in a more fulfilling way, because I don't care whether the child is in childhood or adolescence or grown, they're still needing dad in their life. I'll give you one quick example. Hubert Green, U.S. Open champion for golf, grew up, and here's what Green says. He said, I never saw my dad hug my mom or kiss my mom. I never heard him praise me or my brothers. And yet I worked so hard all my life to hear my dad praise me. He went on, he became a professional golfer. He would win the U.S. Open. He finally took his dad, Jay, to a tournament he was in Japan. He did very well. He sprung for first-class tickets to come home, and his dad was sitting with him in the plane. Now, here he is. He's an adult man, a pro golfer, known throughout households, and his dad isn't saying much. Finally, with a bourbon in his hand, he turns to Hubert Green and says, "Son, you done good out there today." Here's Hubert Green's words. "In that moment, I was flying higher than the plane in which we were riding, because it was the first time I ever heard my dad say, 'You done good.'" Whoa, that says it all of how every kid, regardless of age, boy or girl, is dying to have dad say, "I love you, I'm proud of you, you are special to me, and I am committed to the best for you in your life."
Wow. Well, the book is called Father Wounds, Hope for Healing and Preventing Infections Caused by Those Relational Wounds. And a phrase I wrote down is about the rupture. Every rupture needs to be restored. And what a picture of what I think the Lord wants to do. There's a lot of help out there. I believe this book is one of the most effective I know at helping men take off some of the armor, put down the shield, put the sword down, all the things that you do right, trying to provide for your family, trying to be all that we're supposed to be for our family. But we need those tender warriors. We need the love and affection. I believe the home is to be a place of affection, and that one place that no matter where you go, somebody's on your side. No matter what kind of week you've had at school, or a 0 for 12 in the series that you were in as a young ball player, or making a fumble in the big game, no matter the highs or the lows, it's what goes on at home. The home, of that one home field advantage, home court, home ice, whatever analogy you love with your particular sport. I just want you to know that's what our homes have got to be. The book Father Wounds is one of those things that I promise you will use, and then you will share it or recommend it to others.
Thanks, Jay. I remember so well a phrase you've used since I've known you. That's what happens in the nest determines the rest. What happens at home determines everything else. That is so true. And somebody may be listening and thinking, I think I may have some father wounds. I'm not sure. A good friend of mine who's a Christian counselor with over 35,000 hours of helping people deal with issues, much of which are father wounds, helped put together an instrument in chapter 3 of the book that literally takes you through. Can I know whether or not father wounds have affected me? It's not an infallible tool. It is simply a guide to help you determine, does this apply to me? The rest of the book are steps that are practical on how to deal with a father wound if it's in your life. And for a dad, while it's written to kids who grew up and had some father wounds, a dad can read it and say, wow, I can see some things I need to change and I need to adjust to be the dad God needs me to be at home, regardless of the age of my kids. Everything is based on ultimately forgiving a dad that you may be holding a frustration or an aggravation or a hurt from. And as Andy Stanley says, when we forgive, we don't give to somebody what we feel like they deserve because of the past, so that we can give those in the present what they do deserve. What a great statement.
Yeah, because if we don't forgive, we walk with that loser's limp.
Yeah.
No matter how hard we train, we still got the loser's limp.
So well said.
Bob Reccord, God bless you, your family, your remarkable ministry. And I hope this book is going to be a tool for pastors and educators and for men and women alike. So get this book for your husband. and make the disclaimer. Not that I think you're doing. I just wanted you to know it talks about men being everything they could be. And you know what? We're usually that way because of a loving wife, a partner, somebody that comes along in our life that completes us and helps us get through those sticky wicket moments.
Yeah.
Bob Reccord.
It's available on Amazon, and it's both in digital format and print format. All they have to do is go to Amazon, the book section, and put in Ending the Cycle of Father Wounds, or my name, Bob Reccord. It's got 2 C's rather than 1 because my ancestors evidently stuttered. So Bob Reccord, R-E-C-C-O-R-D, and Ending the Cycle of Father Wounds, print or digital on Amazon.
Wow. Well, I just thought it's because you had a little artistic flair. And,
that must be it.
you know, because you have such a sizzling first name, Bob, you know. So.
Yeah.
Doc, God bless you. Keep on keeping on.
I will. Love you, and thanks for building into my life, my friend.
See you, buddy.
Bye-bye.